everybody. I felt obligated, I think, to share some experience that I've had through independent learning in the independent high school because it's almost like Whitefish is becoming an independent high school. The first point that I want to make is the importance of human interaction, and I stumbled through that because I just really need to enforce that when I talk about human interaction. One of the things that we had initially when the independent high school began were packets, and the high school teachers put together materials for students. And then when we worked with the students at the old building, students went up to the shelf, they pulled a packet off, they sat down at the table, and they did the sheets and they did the activities. But more importantly, within that process, when they needed help, we sat next to them at the table, and we were able to have that human interaction. And as times changed throughout the independent school, and online learning platforms came into place. First was Play-Doh, and now we use Odyssey, where a lot of that human interaction has gone. And it seems like we have it, as we walk around and we talk to students here and we ask them if they want help. But in reality, when I sit next to a student at his or her computer, I'm in their personal bubble. And it's much more challenging to sit shoulder to shoulder with somebody and have a conversation than it is to say in a living room, you sit on one end of the couch and I sit on the other. So with our distance learning right now, this video possibility of having Meet and using Meet and being able to interact either with a group of students as a whole or taking the time to visit with a student for 5-10 minutes or whatever, and using those tools in order to have as much interaction as possible is important. And I made a point before I made this video to prove something. I have not once looked at any of you in the eye, and I'm going to do that now for the rest of the video. When we do our human interaction, I feel very strongly that we need to look at the camera and not the computer screen unless we're clicking on activities or different assignments or different tools in order to demonstrate to students. When we talk, we can see gestures, we can see facial expressions, and we get a lot of our communication actually from body language rather than just the words that are coming out of our mouth. So if we want to build that connection with students or maintain that connection with students, we need to be cognizant of watching the camera. And think about it, nightly news and all the broadcasters, they don't necessarily look at, out into the audience. They're looking at the camera, so they're speaking to us at home. And that's how we kind of build our connection with those people. The second thing is, to do a shout out to Wes again, less is best. I've learned through the years that if a kid can do it, do they have to keep doing it over and over again? Or if they can do it in practice and then they can do it in an assessment, and then all of our assessments kind of reinforce that piece, that's a process to consider. Having students, our natural tendency, I think, is to have students write. But you have to remember, now they're going to be writing for all their classes. So what kind of mode or what kind of tools can we use so that students can have some other way of communicating or demonstrating their skill set to us? And I think that's something we need to consider as well. And then to give you all support that are new to online and digital learning in this whole process, I suggest master creating your classes and feel comfortable. So that is like your assignments and those kinds of things. Get that dialed in and feel comfortable before you start getting extra crafty and say, how can I make this more engaging? Because if it's not automatic when you go to create your assignments and it's not something that's just normal routine for you, you're going to be trying to do two things at the same time in your brain. And I liken it to doing a long division in your head, like 132 divided by 6,741. We all need paper. We have to do that. Our brain doesn't have enough capacity to handle that. So master creating your classes, master creating your assignments, and get those basic, simple assignments in place so that you can do at least measure, student work. The next thing is we all, I think, have realized that we have flexibility, right, in time. And does a kid need to do it? Well, I can tell you what students do not do well, and that is give them assignment due on Friday and then expect it to be there on Friday. And then as a teacher, when we come in and we look for those assignments and we see tons of empties, it's going to overwhelm us. It's going to make us feel like, oh my gosh, these kids aren't doing any work. et cetera, et cetera. So finding a way to make small accountability measures for students, giving them step-by-step assignments to write an essay, a first draft assignment, a second draft assignment. And we don't need to actually assess those assignments unless that's part of our practice and that's what we're looking to do. But it keeps kids accountable and they can see those pieces. I tend to be non-traditional, and I'm not personally a huge fan of deadlines other than we have them because it's the end of the quarter. But academically, I like kids to be able to work at their own pace, and we all have that opportunity now. However, I've also learned that if we don't give kids zeros, they're not going to do the work. So my best practice I've found to be most successful is that if it's a due date, I wait until the next morning I come in or the next day, and then I go through Google Classroom and I see all the missings, and then I put missings in Infinite Campus. That then triggers the kids to actually submit the assignment or complete the assignment. So thinking about putting pieces in step by step and having those accountability scores for grades, whatever you want to call them, to keep the kids on track and motivated to keep moving forward is essential. Just saying, here it is, work at your own pace, I'll be here if you need me, they're not going to do it. They don't have the prefrontal cortex, executive functioning, like we can throw all this jargon around, but they just don't have the skill set to do this. And the last thing I'd like to share is within this, we're going to think about this as a blended learning model. And a blended learning is figuring out how do we blend technology and our instruction together to maintain that dialogue. Because without context and just rote memorization and information on the page, the kids can regurgitate and they can process the information, but they need to know how it applies or how it's important outside. And my experience with that is, I'll give you a fishing anecdote. Within fishing, it took me a long time. I taught myself to fly fish, and I learned a lot of stuff. The next phase that I'm leaning towards is learning how to two-hand or spey cast. And within that, there's all these different fly lines, and they're used with different grains and different weights and different lengths. And it all depends, and you can vary those depending on the current, so that you one are getting the fly or the fly to the fish, so you can engage the fish and hook it right, without getting hung up on the bottom. So metaphorically, how does that apply to teaching? It's the same deal, right? I'm been fly fishing for years, and I feel really good about nymphing and dry fly fishing in my casts. I do not feel good about this new technique. So when we think about our teaching techniques, most of us have been teaching for years, and we have our repertoire, and we know how to catch fish or how to hook students and how to engage our students. And now we're learning a new tool for that process. So fall back on what you're good at, and then don't be afraid to experiment and kind of move forward. I hope this little video is valuable. I hope it's a vote of confidence for all of you. The general attitude that I've seen working with all you teachers as I've been floating from classroom to classroom and kind of giving you the little background tech support has been overwhelmingly positive. And I really appreciate working with all of you. And I hope keeping in mind that looking at the camera when you're talking to students or making your video when you're not having to look at your keyboard or your screen to manipulate different software things, and maintaining that human connection with our students is going to be our greatest tool for success. So I hope this helps.